Hey everybody, Bill here from WMD Photography. Today I'm going to take a few minutes to explain frequency separation. And the images I'm going to use, or the image I'm going to use, is from a photo shoot that I did recently with Zara Swan. I will leave links in the description of the video to her Instagram page if you want to go and check out her other work. Okay, let's get started. So the goal here is to take care of any skin blemishes that might be in the photo. And now Zara's got wonderful skin, and everybody has a few little blemishes here and there. No one's skin is perfect. We're going to try and improve on the reality here just a little bit. Okay, the purpose of frequency separation is to separate the texture of the skin from the color of the skin. Put that onto two different layers. That allows us to manipulate each one independently without affecting the other. So I can go in and fix any texture issues without affecting the color, and I can fix color issues without affecting the texture. And that's the ultimate goal with frequency separation and why we do it. For a long time, it was considered a high-end retouching technique, but the reality is that it's not all that difficult to do. It takes a few minutes to do, but it's not terribly complicated. Okay, I'm going to start by showing you how to create the layers that we need in order to separate out the texture from the color. And I'm going to do that by creating two copies of the existing base layer. Control J and Control J, so I get two copies. And I'm going to rename these low frequency, and the upper layer I'm going to call high frequency, or high. Now it's important that we place these in the correct order, so we have one above the other. The high frequency, or the texture, is going to live on the high frequency layer, and it's going to sit above the low frequency, which will contain all the color information. All right, so for the low frequency layer, I am going to go to, first I'm going to turn off high so you can see what's going on. I'm going to go to Filter, Noise, and Dust and Scratches. Now you can also do this with the Gaussian blur layer, but the goal is to just blur out the image so that you don't see any texture and all you really see is color. And I'm using 15 pixels for the radius here, and I'm going to hit OK. That'll apply that to the low frequency layer. I'll turn the high frequency layer back on, and now I'm going to go to Image, Apply Image, and I'm going to tell it to apply it to the low, so using the low frequency layer, and we're going to the blending mode is going to be subtract, so we're subtracting the texture from the low frequency layer. The scale and the offset. Scale is 2, offset is 128. These numbers are important, so is the blending mode, and of course you got to select the correct layer to use as the reference. And I'll hit OK. And this looks a lot like a high pass filter, right? It's showing all the texture in the image. Now I'm going to change the blend mode to linear light, and I'm going to group these two layers together so that using Control G, and I'm going to change the name of the group to FS for frequency separation. Okay, now if I turn this group of layers off and on, we don't see any change to the image at all. And that's what we want. These two images, when combined using linear light blending mode, when those two are combined, we should get an exact copy of the original background layer. And the texture lives on the high frequency layer, and the color information lives on the low frequency layer. Now I'm going to add one more layer, and we call this a check layer. This allows us to see the blemishes that we're trying to edit. It makes it easier to see. So I'm going to choose a black and white filter, black and white adjustment layer using the blue filter, and I'm actually going to swing the reds way over into about -80, and close that out so it's out of the way. I hope Xara doesn't get too mad at me for showing all this detail, but it's just part of the process. Everybody has minor skin blemishes, and frequency separation is how we deal with those in portrait photography. Now, we have our frequency separation layers set up, but that took a long time to get ready before we can actually start. And it's something that has to be done for every image that you're going to use frequency separation for. So it is possible to create an automated script, an action, as they call it in Facebook, to set this up for us. And I'm going to demonstrate that here now. I'm going to take the ones that we've created and throw them in the garbage, and start with just a fresh image. And I'm going to run the script that I created earlier. And they're really easy to create. All you got to do is just hit the record. Well, you create a new script, hit the record button, and then go through the process that we described earlier about creating the two layers, rename them, put them in the group, and apply the blurring to the low frequency layer, do the applied image to the high frequency layer, and go as far as to create the check layer as well. Do all of that stuff and then stop recording your actions, and it'll ask you to give it a name. I've just called mine FS for frequency separation. So if I hit play, that will generate the layers for me and do the blurring and create the check layer. And we can turn the check layer off, go in, and we're ready to start doing our frequency separation here at this point. I just didn't want you to think you had to go through that painful process every single time you go to edit an image. You can have a script automatically create these layers for you, and then you can just go in, do your clone stamping and your healing and that kind of stuff. Okay, back to the project. We've got our check layer so we can see everything clearly. We've got our high frequency and low frequency layer. So now I'm going to go and address some of these blemishes. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool and make sure that it's set to current layer, not current and below or all layers. We want it to be set to current layer. And I've got my flow set to about 20% and the opacity set to 100. Now what we want to do is go around and we want to take a sample. So I'm holding the Alt key down, picking an area of good skin, and I'm going to copy it or clone it over the areas that I want to fix. And again, I'll sample over here, come down and clone over top of areas that need to be fixed. Excuse me. All right, now I'm going to pick up my pace a little bit. And you want to continue to sample from close by where you are making your fixing the blemishes, right? You don't want to take a sample from the forehead and then go down and apply it on the cheeks. The lighting will change from area to area, and the texture would look artificial. All right. And again. Okay, and I'll probably speed this part of the video up so that you don't have to sit and watch me do all of this. And this does a pretty good job of removing stray hairs as well. Just have to take your time and sample close by, and there we go. And I think you get the idea. Good. Turn off that check layer, and we can see what we've done so far. And as you can see, it's pretty subtle. We haven't affected the underlying skin tones. We've only changed the texture a little bit, taken out some of the blemishes. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the low frequency layer, and this is where the color information lives. And what I want to do in this area is I want to kind of blend the colors together so that it doesn't look quite as patchy here and there. And I'm going to take areas like this, group them together, and let's just take a quick look here with the quick mask. Yeah, so I've got a nice soft feathered edge, so we're not going to have a hard line when I start making changes. And that's controlled up here with the feather, right? I've got it set to 18 pixels at the moment. And now I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Notice I have a shortcut created here on my keyboard layout. You can go and create your own. Control Alt and G for Gaussian Blur is what I use. So if I seem to be magically bringing up the Gaussian blur, and you're not knowing how I'm doing it, that's how. I'm just using a keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to go around and envelop areas that I think could use a little bit of blending, and you can do fairly large areas at a time. Wouldn't get too crazy, but you can work on fairly large areas. Let's just take a look. There we go. So I'm adjusting the amount of blur each time I apply it. I'll just go in here. Frequency separation can be used on other areas of the image too. It's not just for skin. So if I want to take care of this mark that's on the paper background that I'm shooting against, I can come in here and circle this and bring up the Gaussian blur and set it to say 36, maybe a little higher, 42. There we go. That takes care of that. Well, took care of most of it. Let's try it again. There we go. We'll cycle the changes on and off, so that's off and on, off and on, so you can see what we've accomplished here. Very minimal, but it makes a world of difference. Okay, and one little note, I've shot with Xera many times, so I know that this is a beauty mark. It's there all the time. This other stuff is transitive. It comes and goes depending on the day. And we all get those, right? You wake up in the morning and you get another pimple on your face and get all upset, but you know it's going to be gone in a couple of days. It's not going to last forever. But any marks that are part of a person's features, I would be reluctant to remove them. So these things here, beauty mark here, I leave that alone. No need to do anything with it. All right, let's go back to Lightroom. And there's a lot more I could do with this image. I mean, a little bit of dodging and burning and brightening the eyes, and doing a little contouring with dodge and burn might be something that we'll look at another time. But today we're discussing frequency separation. Okay, we'll let this go back to Lightroom. It has to save the image first. And then we will crop this and call it done. And there we go. All right. And I want this to be square. And I want it to be a portrait, a headshot. So, go here, bring that up just a little bit. Using the rule of thirds, you can see that the grid line passes right through her eyes. That's where I want the attention to be drawn to. I want to frame this so we're just barely seeing her shoulders. And that's perfect. Beautiful. I love it. Okay. I hope you guys learned something, and encourage you to ask questions in our group, and I'll see what I can do to try and answer them for you. Thanks, and have a good night.